Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Shampoo to My Dandruff, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Not much, Daniel. My wife and I did something out of character, and that was go to a concert last night. And so,
Living the wildlife.
yes, in the big city. So I'm more tired than I should otherwise be today. But it was good.
It looked pretty wild. Some soft, like mellow folk music
At the Atlanta Symphony Hall. Yeah, we saw the Swell season, Glenn Hansard, Marquetta Irglova. Really good.
So you dragged your wife to a very classy venue to see some like sophisticated folk music. I dragged my wife to a concert for the first time in a sketchy venue where some woman dressed up as a dwarf threw up on her in the line, and the floor was sticky. So I think we had very different experiences. We earned very different brownie points or lack of brownie points with our wives.
You be the judge.
Yeah, we'll say Sam makes up for it in other ways. But we're glad that you guys have joined us. Always a lot of fun stuff to talk about here. Just crazy stuff going on in culture, and even just less crazy, just important things, conversations for Christians to be an active participant in. We got some interesting stories today, kind of some more stuff sort of based on just, hey, general, how do we engage with entertainment? How do we engage in movies that have bad stuff in them? Definitely an important question for Christians. Talking about The Meg because, hey, I like shark movies and The Meg is a shark movie. And then also touch on some more like church-based stuff. So lots of stuff to get into. Encourage you guys, jump in the comment section, have a conversation with us, share your thoughts. Just as we sort of dig into some of this, what Scripture has to say. But why don't we just kick things off like we always do with cultural conversations. So kind of our first main topic for today, we're continuing to milk the old Barbieheimer cow.
For all it's worth.
For all it's worth. There's just been a lot of, beyond just being noteworthy movies, both those movies have had just a lot of kind of raised interesting issues, conversations, kind of different aspects that touch on like wider issues for Christians engaging with culture. So there's another one that we just haven't really gotten into yet that I've seen come up in like comments on our review or just other articles online, and kind of as people are kind of navigating some of these movies, and that is related to Oppenheimer. It's kind of one of the big conversations with this movie is that this was the first movie that director Christopher Nolan chose to include sex and nudity, previously being very straight away from that type of content. This movie, he decided to kind of respond to the critics and wade into some territory that he hasn't done so, which, hey, if you checked out our Collision review, ultimately resulted in what I think was very gratuitous, unnecessary nudity, which seems to be the consensus for most Christians. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, at least that's the one that people share. Like, I don't know many Christians like, oh no, I love my favorite part was all the gratuitous nudity. So it seems like that's most Christians have sort of said, like, hey, that's just an unfortunate part in this movie.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think like maybe the more interesting, rather than just sort of the discussion of like, hey, do we want more nudity or less nudity in our movies as Christians? Like maybe the more interesting question, at least to me, is like, what do you do with that? Like, what do you do with movies that have, because obviously some movies are pretty clear cut. Like, hey, this is like a super raunchy movie that it's harder to justify as a Christian being like, paying money to go watch. It's just, filled with sex and profanity and violence. And like, whereas like a movie like Oppenheimer is a little more nuanced because it's sort of these isolated moments that are gratuitous in what I would say otherwise is like a very compelling, buzzworthy, like well-crafted movie. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of seems like, and again, I haven't seen the movie yet because I don't go to movies because I have two small kids and it's not something I've done much lately. But it does seem like it's like a too enthusiastic thumbs up with a caveat is sort of the consensus from a lot of people. And I don't think just Christians are saying that either. I think it's also, non-believers as well that are kind of just for this movie in particular. It's kind of a bit of a head scratcher because it seems to be, from what I've heard, it's just kind of very unnecessary and disjointed to the rest of the movie, and so it kind of just seems one of those like, here's a naked person, like just for kicks, and so that I think that particularly is a bit odd, but I think in general, um, one way that I think a lot of people would maybe approach this would be if you like view it at home, you have a little more control, and if it's something where it's like there's a minute and a half that you just would rather not sit through, then just skip over that and carry on your merry movie viewing way. Um, and I think there is some merit to that. It's I think it just gets tricky. Or it can be when you like start altering movies very much beyond like what they were intended to be, and sometimes you just have to say that maybe this movie is not for you.
Yeah, because I think that's to me, 'cause that's sort of being the like there's sort of when it comes to that, like, hey, what do you do with a movie like Oppenheimer that is a good movie that has some stuff that Christians probably shouldn't be exposed to, or like support, or just to be more discerning about. Like you sort of have the two sides of the coin. Like the one is just like you said, hey, maybe instead of going to the theater, or maybe you go to the theater, you go get popcorn, or you you look at your shoes and you just sort of wait for it to pass, or
Yeah.
else you wait for it to drop on HBO or whatever streaming service this will be on, and you just with your remote and you're watching the movie, you're enjoying it, you get to these scenes, you skip over them, and then you just keep going, enjoy the rest of the movie. Sort of this like, can you to use like a metaphor, can you like cut the rotten stuff out of the banana and then just still enjoy a good banana? Or kind of the other side of that, which I've seen in conversations with Christians, is just sort of like, at what level should Christians just not be not endorsing, but like investing, or like immersing themselves in stuff that has, like if we're just constantly trying to skip through stuff that we don't agree with, and that we think is wrong, like at what point is it more discerning and like more appropriate to just not
Skip it all together.
not
Yeah.
yeah, just stay away from that, kind of like the more like the Joseph in Genesis, like you just
Yeah.
leave your coat, you flee from it, you just don't put yourself in situations where because it is complicated, like there's is that you are getting close to, especially a thing like nudity or sex in movies, like hey, you're a guy at home and you have your remote and you're just planning to skip through it, like even if you do, like is that just not being wise? Like is that
Yeah.
because there is an interesting there was a I think we have a picture of this. There's an interesting thing done in like some other countries that are stricter about what can be shown, like as far as nudity and stuff in theaters. They released this movie, but with a few I think AI enhanced
Adaptations.
alterations to it. Which if we throw the picture up, if you're watching our video version, this is one of those scenes. Actress Florence Pugh, and she's in this chair. It's sort of an extended scene where she's talking with Oppenheimer. And as you can see in the picture, she's wearing a dress. In the movie, she's not wearing a dress. This is one of those scenes where she is naked, nude all throughout this scene, and it's crazy because even just like the picture itself, to me, just changes the whole dynamic of that. Like in this picture, like she's more of like she seems like more of a character. Like the focus would be on what she's talking about, like what she,
Yeah.
rather than just the fact that she's like reclining in a chair, and like the focus is on the fact that she's naked. Like,
Yeah.
but it's sort of this picture and kind of the conversation. Like I know, like you said, there's some issues just as far as like artistic integrity and like altering stuff that artworks, and like that's a whole minefield. But even like for like this like a Christian perspective, like if we could just do this and like change those scenes, I feel like that would like radically change the discussion that Christians are having about this movie, which seems to suggest that like maybe we can enjoy things that we sort of discern. I don't know. Is that being too flippant and like?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think like those sort of things I mean, I think you can still, like, changes like that. I think would make a lot of sense, and I think it would be the least amount of taking away from the original work itself. And so in that sense, it's um, again, you're still changing, the original intent of the author, but I think it's the least intrusive way, I think, to sort of make something a little more uh, palatable, I guess, for Christian viewers. That's not necessarily like just cutting out swaths of dialogue or whole episodes or whatever, and allowing people to still like sort of experience the closest thing to what was intended, um, and it not be something that would necessarily compromise them.
Yeah, and I do think ultimately, I don't think this is one of those things that has a clear like biblical. Because I get both sides of it. Like, I do think, and I think it depends
Yeah.
on what the content is, what the movie is. Like there is some movies, even like for reviews at the Collision, where I'm like, I just don't think that that's something I, even as a reviewer, like want to go see. Even if I sort of look away or try not to, there's just too much sort of garbage in it to have
Yeah.
value.
And I guess
Uh,
that's the thing is like, what, I think what a lot of Christians want to know is like, what's the acceptable amount of garbage in a movie? Like, where's that threshold? And I think one of the tricky things about entertainment is there's not necessarily a very clear line about that. Like, I think there is a bit of um, fuzziness when it comes to like, well, if there's more than one f bomb, you got to get out of there. It's like, well, that's not like, it's just hard to put down like really like, here's the line you shall not pass. Um, and so I think it's easy if we can just have like, okay, here are the guardrails, and then you can just play
Yeah, because we
in
typically,
between.
I feel like most people have the same hierarchy of like sexual stuff is at the top, then
Yeah.
violence, then profanity, and like our tolerance for that is like inverse. Like very little tolerance for like sexual nudity. Violence we're queasy about, but we can stomach more of it.
Yeah.
And profanity, like, we might not like it, but it's sort of like, hey, it's just we just that's how some people talk, and we kind of move on.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think we necessarily have a very clear. And I do think that is a valid
Hierarchy.
hierarchy.
Yeah.
Like I think I've said before in like some Collision material, like I do think the sexual stuff is a different category than like profanity, like
Yeah.
being exposed, hearing stuff, even like the violence, where like you're seeing stuff and you can be desensitized to it, but you're not necessarily like a participant in it. Where like a lot of these like gratuitous sexual things like are designed almost to like invoke emotions and like feel like they're trying to be sensual, and like
Yeah.
there is more of a danger for Christians to be like, it's not just that you're hearing language that you wouldn't say yourself, like you're actively sort of participating in this
Yeah.
entertainment. One of the verses I know we've used, and then we can move on to our next topic, but we've used here at the Collision a lot, is this Matthew 10:16, where it says, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." And I like that verse. That's sort of one of the foundational, I know it's not directly on like entertainment, but it is on how do you navigate a world as Christians that's going to have stuff that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
And I do like to it does bring up both of those. And I think we need, as Christians, you need both. Like, it's not just about the innocent. Like, if you just sort of stay away from anything and preserve your innocence, like, I think the fact that he also says, be shrewd, wise as serpents, like, implies that you're also going places and like in a world that you're going to have
It
discernment.
requires wisdom,
Like,
that
like
wisdom.
you don't, if
Yeah.
you're just purely preserving like innocence, like anything that even at all hints towards like sin or wrongness, like, I can't be exposed to hearing someone swear or something, like, I think then you don't need the discernment as much.
Yeah.
So I do think that's, it is sort of built into the Bible that, hey, that you're going to be in a world that's different. Like, how you navigate that, you need discernment. Although you also need, like, you can't neglect the innocence part either and be like,
Yeah.
I dive into a bunch of, this garbage stuff, but I'm discerning about it. Like, I think as Christians, we do need to find how you balance that. And I don't think there's a clear answer. I think maybe it does come down to sort of kind kind of for each Christian. But hey, let us know with you guys if you guys have seen Oppenheimer or just other movies like that. If you have any, I guess, just methods or just kind of philosophies, like how you do that. How do
Yeah.
you, hey, this is when there's movies that have this, I either don't see them or else I wait to watch them at home or whatever it is. Would love to hear how you navigate movies that that are good, but hey, this have some stuff that that you probably don't want to see.
And speaking of things that don't require discernment,
Yeah, things that you can accept wholesale, just
Whole
good
cloth.
all the way around, whether you're a Christian, non-Christian, wherever you are. There's our next segment of our show. We have Host Corner. So this is my turn to ramble on about something for a minute. And I'm kind of inspired. I saw the movie Gran Turismo yesterday. We'll have a review up for that in the next couple of days or so. But based on sort of a video game, the value of a video game, I thought I would just give a quick pushback to the old kind of stereotype that, hey, back in the day, kids used to go outside and play with sticks, and nowadays, all these young whippersnappers, they're just their brains are decaying from all these video games and just rotting this mindless entertainment. That actually, at least according to multiple scientific studies, it's been shown that video games actually can contribute to healthy brain development in different ways. There's been a handful of these. You can Google these studies, but kind of like analyzing the development of kids that do play like in healthy amounts video games, like their ability that inspires to like quick thinking and like problem solving and puzzle, and even some that have shown that like, because of the type of stimuli that like the actual biology of the brain, like the gray matter has increases through some of these video games. And even as a parent, my kids are they play the odd video game when mommy and daddy need a break. Games like Minecraft and some of these sort of puzzle games, even like the latest Zelda, which has a lot of puzzle solving, and just to watch some of like the creativity that it inspires in them. Definitely, I think some of that narrative is maybe outdated. That hey, all things are bad without moderation, but that video games can actually be a positive for kids, or at least that's what I want to believe. But what do you think, Sam? You're not necessarily a big gamer.
I'm not. I used to be a bigger gamer than I was. As a youth, would play lots of Halo and other games, sort of back in the day. Grew up on Command and Conquer, the PC console game, which was that that was where video games peaked. But no, I would definitely agree with this. And I think it's funny because even to that end, we have an old Wii console that's been in the attic for a while because Carrie and I just don't play it. We actually used to play it back when we were dating, but we've been actually thinking about pulling that out and having our oldest, who's 4, do some of the Wii bowling and maybe Mario Karts and that kind of stuff, because it's a video game that is also sort of very tactile and like you have to do motions and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I've always seen the value in video games. Like obviously you can go down a wormhole and not come out the other side if you just let it consume you. But
Which is one of the, again, I don't want to get, I feel like when Gran Turismo, the movie comes out, this will probably be more of a bigger conversation here on one of our episodes. But a lot of the stuff like people say about video games tend to be things that like aren't actually about the game. Like it can consume too much time. Well, anything can do that. I don't know. Some games are mindless, but like some books are mindless. Like
yeah, and it's like, okay, like you can spend 4 hours playing like 18 holes of golf and like spend thousands of dollars on golf each year. I mean, like you can make that argument about golf and like, sure, okay, you're getting some exercise like playing golf, but it's like, those balance of scales are like, I don't think are very aligned. And so I think you can say that about just about everything.
And I do think that the most vocal people against video games are usually those that have not played video games. Like, they have these sort of the stereotype with like the kid.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that, and then we can move on, but is that the whole violence in video games leads to real world violence. Because anytime there's unfortunately some sort of an incident or a mass shooting, I feel like the media tends to always drag out like the increase in violent video games and the violence in video games. So it's like that has been proven, I think, on multiple occasions to not really there's no correlation between video game violence and like real world.
Yeah,
Violence.
I think like, the possible bad things about video games get lots of like airtime.
Yeah.
Like the possible good things about like thinking quickly and reaction times and like problem solving don't get a lot of airtime, except for on host corners of everyone's favorite.
And I think like to what you said, it's way more engaging, and so I think you're thinking and you're having to problem solve a lot more so than other types of entertainment, like just shows that are dumb and annoying. It's like I would much rather than play a game that's at least engaging their brain in some way rather than just like mind-numbing entertainment.
Yeah, which is at least what I tell myself to justify the amount of time that I've spent playing the new Zelda game. But we'll probably get into the video game stuff in a later episode. But I did at least want to get that out there because I do think that video games don't always get a fair rap. But something that probably does get a fair rap and is pretty clearly lacking any value developmentally is the Meg and the Meg 2, The Trench. So that we don't want to spend a whole lot of time because, hey, these movies aren't necessarily designed to be thought deeply about, but not even just the Meg themselves. The new movie Meg 2 just came out. We got a review on our channel. I encourage you to check that out if you're one of the very few people that are interested in
one of the 6 people who bought a ticket.
Meg 2, then check that out. But I did think we had sort of this more general level of just like as Christians, like what's the value of any of these sort of creature type movies? Like, is there anything edifying? Again, obviously, if you guys have been following our channel, The Collision, you know that I am a Jaws apologist.
Do we still have?
Oh, I think we have various
Somewhere.
places. We do have a shark in my camera, I think, but
We used to have a nice Jaws poster.
I know we need more Jaws stuff in the studio. But I'm a huge Jaws guy. I'm a huge Alien guy. That these sort of creature movies, there's Jaws over my shoulder, that I find value in at least some of these movies, and I typically maybe am in the minority among Christians for that. I know you're not necessarily as diehard Jaws as me, but I do feel like
I'm very much into the monster movies, and I love like Jaws, Alien, A Quiet Place. I think I would put in that category as well. But I think there's a lot of value if done well, and that's a big caveat because I do think movies like The Meg and The Meg 2. And based on our very limited research and polling our audience over on Instagram, most people were either unaware that there was even a sequel, and if they were aware, we're definitely not gonna watch it. And I think that tells you a lot that like there's a monster movie category that's just like essentially pure spectacle, which Meg 2 falls into that. And I think when you do that, it's like the value of the movie is just basically to zero or less. And then I think the other side of that is something like Jaws, where it is done extremely well and it's very effective in like conjuring up emotions of fear and like suspense, and like there's a lot of buy-in to the characters that are developed in those movies.
So do you think that is sort of one of the misunderstandings that I think some Christians have towards these type of movies, is that it's just, hey, these movies are just about death. Like it's just, who can the shark eat? Which again, I think like the Meg 2, that's just largely what the movie's about. Like I think some of them can be like that, but like at their best, I feel like creature type movies, like they have death and like consequences that feel shocking and real because the focus is on life. Like these are survival. Like the Alien is very much that. Like characters get killed by the alien, but like the focus is never on like, ooh, like what clever gory way can we have this character die? Like it's very much like these characters, you're rooting for these characters. Which is sort of how I divide like creature movies. Like, is it a movie that you're rooting for like characters to survive, or is it a movie where you're like cheering on and like waiting for characters to die? Like, is it just spectacle of like, all these guys are gonna get eaten by sharks, like let's see how they get eaten, like, or is
Yeah.
it more, and I feel like, is it more like, hey, we want these people to survive, we're sad that this person didn't make it, but like it's inspiring that this person kind of fought against the forces of nature. And like I do think there are kind of some like Christian virtues and stuff that can come out on the one side of that
Yeah.
divide,
Well,
but don't
I
on the
think a
other.
good sort of maybe litmus test for this is like how many shots in the movie are like medium to close up, and how many shots are like wide. Because if it's a bunch of wide shots, like panning a beach, and like that's most of what the movie is, and like some monolithic creature coming up from the depths to like just wreak havoc on like just giant swaths of faceless people, like that's way more into the just it's just kind of a spectacle, and there's no real value to that. Whereas if it's like you've got a lot of close-ups, you're getting to know these characters, and so you're investing in their story and the plot, then I think it's gonna tend more towards the focusing on life, focusing on the survival side of it, and less on like just the death and destruction. Although there is some of that.
Yeah, and even
in
like
it.
things like horror and death in movies like aren't necessarily kind of automatically things that fall outside the range of what Christian like
Yeah.
should be exposed to, or that's very much that's too far. I think some of the depictions can be too far, where it is this sort of like a gore fest and like desensitizing, and Christians need to discern with that. But I think like death is a reality. Like some of this
Yeah.
horrific stuff makes us intentionally uncomfortable, and like it sort of jars us. Like I think all powerful things that these types of movies can, and then that highlights like the characters that do survive and they do manage to kind of persevere. And so I do think there is edifying stuff in these types of movies that some Christians maybe miss because they don't want to get into it. Although I do like with a movie like The Meg, which I didn't necessarily think was like just awful or like. Well, I mean, I thought it was awful, but I didn't think it was just like purely sinful and like
Yeah.
evil. I just thought it was
It's
like,
just a dumb,
this is a dumb movie.
dumb movie.
But it does sort of leave you kind of like afterwards, like when I was like working on our collision review, it's like, what is the value of that? Like, is it just sort of entertainment that's just like feeding you death? Like it's just people getting eaten and like, there's no real like edifying virtues coming out of like their survival of the characters. Is just sort of like, isn't it funny that this whole beach got eaten by sharks? Like this person got eaten. Like I do think Christians should at least question, even if they decide, hey, you know what, is this?
Yeah, well, because I think there's lots to explore in the idea that there are like enormous creatures in the ocean, and like I think that the idea of that is terrifying, and so I think there are great stories that you could tell about some sort of enormous 1,000-year-old shark that's just been swimming in the trenches forever and needs to feed from time to time, but without it just being this like giant CGI just kill fest. And it's like, because I feel like you could do that in a way that would be very like compelling, and not just some sort of more or less useless movie.
Yeah, you can, because even a movie like Godzilla, again, those movies also have the good and the bad, but at least it sort of had like, it was symbolic of like the bomb, and like there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that is like, hey, this sort of represents like we've created a monster that can destroy yourself. Like there is sort of value and stuff. But hey, let us know what you guys think, how you sort of approach creature movies, if there's some that you enjoy, or if you just have a hard time stomaching movies where people get eaten on screen. I would love to have a conversation with you about that. Kind of our last topic for this episode is actually based on an article that we have here at the Collision on our website, thecollision.org. This is not an article that I wrote, so I can be more blatant and shameless to plug it. This is one that guest author, author Nathan Clarkson wrote. So Christian creatives need mentors. And he sort of wrote that article from the perspective of a working actor in Hollywood, although not necessarily working right now with all the strikes.
Yeah.
But someone that sort of navigated Hollywood and sort of his journey of the value that he's found with just having godly people and like other artists that kind of help them navigate that. So I think it's a good article if you're an artist, particularly. I encourage you to check that out. But I think we could kind of talk about that. Sort of, I know here, and I think just in general, we do that here at the Collision. a lot of the time the focus can be on like the critiquing culture, like, hey, this is the bad in culture, this is the stuff that we can kind of point to that's good, but maybe less focus sometimes as far as like how do we contribute to culture, how do we
Yeah.
raise up people that make good art rather than just like share our thoughts on the internet about bad art, things that we don't like.
Unholy art.
So I do think that that is sort of a neglected area for Christian kind of cultural engagement, that a lot of churches just don't put as much maybe focus on as they can. What are your sort of initial thoughts? You read the article and just
Yeah.
you've been in churches. You are creative in church. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think just sort of the idea of mentorship in general, I think has changed for me over the years, and I think like early on, you think of a mentor as just sort of like one person, like I have a mentor, but I think probably the maybe the better way to think about it, and how I've started to sort of think about it now, is having mentors like in particular areas of your life. So if you're, you know, an entrepreneur, like it makes sense to find, you know, an entrepreneur who's kind of been down the track a bit further than you. If you're, you know, wanting to do acting or, you know, something in the creative space, find someone who's in that creative space to connect with. And you don't have to have like one person that sort of fills all these areas in your life. And in fact, I don't think you should. I think it's good to have just like general mentor and like just someone who supports you and just appreciates you and can kind of help keep you accountable and on track in general. But I think I like the idea of finding mentors that are more specific to what it is you're going after. And I think that I don't know that that's necessarily encouraged as much in church. It's more just like, you just need, you know, you're a young guy, like find an older guy, you know, like he's a guy too, and you're both guys and you can help each other. And, you know, he was young once too, and he can sort of help you through life. And I think there is some value to that, but, you know, somebody who has gone before and directed movies and done these things, you know, I would want to, you know, be with that person to help me if I'm going to try and direct movies. Maybe I don't take like marriage advice from this person, or maybe I don't take like parenting advice or that kind of stuff, but they're obviously good at their craft. They've been in it longer than I have, and I think there's some value to be had from that. So like you don't need like one person to like fill all these gaps. If that,
yeah, like for example,
my
like,
rambling.
for Sam, I'm definitely the mentor for you on how to make good like music choices. Like I know I definitely walk you through, you know, the latest power metal coming up from Germany. And
Yeah, it's a great, like, it's sort of the negative of, so it's like what he says, it's like, okay, so that means like, what is the opposite of Swedish
German
power metal? And then I say, okay, I think I'll go that direction. So you have been
which
really,
is probably U.S. power metal because very different metal scenes.
yeah,
But I do think, and one of the things that I think comes out in the article that I appreciate too, is that like I think mentorship in church is something that we might not use the word always mentorship,
yeah,
like just like discipleship, and like some of that is encouraged in church. But maybe one of the areas that gets missed is like the pursuits, or like the parts of our life that are beyond, or not beyond, but like different from the strictly spiritual. Like,
yeah,
you know, like we think, hey, here's a talented writer or dancer or filmmaker or painter or whatever sort of creative person they are. Like, you know, let's give them this mentor of, you know, this person's never picked up a paintbrush in their life, but like it's a godly lady and she can, you know, walk through the Bible and like how to be, which again, I think we need that. Like,
yeah, yeah.
but we sort of, we
But
mentor and equip.
that tends to be like the only kind of mentor you can find.
Yeah,
in
and I think
church.
like to work out from that, you end up with a lot of godly artists that aren't very good. Like, because you know we very much get, which I think is the most important part, which is the spiritual stuff. But we're just not intentional about like, hey, as God's given us, you know, if these artists are sort of like missionaries for us, like, or like representatives, they're going into the culture and making a difference. Like, is it enough to just make sure that they're a good godly person, or can we also be intentional about make it mentoring their skill sets and like, hey, you make, you like films and stuff. Like, here's a guy that has had a lot of experience with cameras and things. Like, let's sort of connect you guys, and with the idea that leads to you being more capable and making better stuff and kind of having a more profound impact. And I think that kind of gets missed because I do think as the church we tend to focus almost exclusively on the spiritual.
Yeah, and I think sort of you can look and see how like the church at large has engaged with culture today, and you can see that it by and large has failed at doing that because the new people going out into culture are not well equipped to engage with culture, and especially in the arts. I mean, there are obviously exceptions to this, but I think when you think of the church and like culture, or the arts especially, like there seems to be a pretty big gap, and I think in general the church has not done a great job of equipping its people to be the best, whatever they're going to be. That's in the workplace, that's in the arts, that's in whatever. I think it has tended to be very like church centric. Like, cool, you paint. We have this special mural program we're going to do in our kids' building, and I know we sort of probably use that example to death, but when the church can kind of pat itself on the back and be like, hey, we value our artists because we gave them very strict parameters on how to paint this
and serve our program
and serve the thing that we're doing in the church. And so it's very, very focused inward, and less like, okay, you're doing that. Well, I think we know a guy who's like, has been successful in your industry. Like, let's maybe connect you with that person. It's very much like, well, cool. Well, how can we plug in those, blossoming skill sets into what we're doing? And again, that's, I think there are obviously exceptions to that and churches that are doing that well. But I think in general, that has been kind of a miss for the church.
Yeah, because I think maybe like the area that I think the church does, at least traditionally has done more of, is like in like sports. Like I feel like there is more intentional, like more like infrastructure to like football camps and things where it's like, hey, we're gonna
like FCA, like
we're gonna equip people to be godly athletes, but like we're also gonna equip them to be better athletes, like and be more successful in what they're doing. And I feel like that model could be mimicked or like be an inspiration for like creatives. Like hey, we host an art camp at our church, and like we give people a chance to like meet other artists, and like we connect them, and we give a platform for people that have done it. And
so why do you have any thoughts on like why do you think the church, I think by and large, has been successful in athletics, let's say, like in equipping athletes, and not as successful in equipping creatives?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel
like I don't know if you thought of it. Like I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
And I feel like there's probably a bunch of reasons. I think some of it is a value issue. Like people tend to value sports. Like Christians tend to value like sports, and like more into that than like the arts can be sort of a murky like. Well, there's we think of the arts, and we think of like bad Hollywood, or we think of like the weird artist types, and there just sort of is. I guess less value there. I think there's
not those weird abusive sports types.
Yeah, they're all good. And I also do think that there is, which maybe a bigger reason is just that we don't see the need because we think we're filling the need. Like because like the arts are a part of every Sunday service. So like we're giving artists a platform, and like artists serve in our church, or at least musicians like serve in our church. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we are scratching that itch that there is like, rather than, I guess just being aware of like, hey, but like, are we actually like supporting them outside, and like, or is it just, hey, if you play the songs we tell you, every second week at church, like, then you can come, we'll support you then. So I do think there is, some of it's just that we haven't really thought through kind of the best way, and there's some fear involved, but I do think a lot of it is just an awareness thing of like, hey, maybe we should do that. Maybe we're not doing that as much as we are maybe we thought we were. But
And
hey, oh,
I'll just say one more thing is just to sort of in sort of finding a mentor. I think it's much easier to like ask someone who you see as a potential mentor for you, because I would just say as a word of encouragement to people who are sort of in that place of like I need, I'm trying to figure out my life or figure out sort of this creative calling that I have, and this is the direction I kind of know I want to go. And if you identify somebody, have the courage to approach that person and ask, because most of the time, people who like if you ask somebody about something that they do or that they're passionate about, like they're gonna definitely want to share, and like because I've even had people ask me about like photography stuff or video stuff, because that's a lot of what I've done, and like I'm more than happy to just share whatever. I mean, I don't know everything, but it's like I'm happy to share what I know and what's worked for me and that kind of stuff. And so I think I don't know, just maybe don't be too intimidated to approach somebody who, maybe you respect their opinion and respect their work. And like more than likely they're going to want to and freely share that information.
yeah, it
with
is
you.
sort of like almost like an illusionary divide of like this person needs that, this person will be more than happy to give that. But there's this like gap of like
Yeah.
neither one really feels like they're
Yeah,
gonna
because you feel funny like, oh, well, let me just, oh, I see you have a camera.
Yeah.
Let me just, dump all of my wisdom on you without asking. But there's also I know that person like does photography but I don't want to ask, because I think asking somebody about their craft, I think more times than not, you're going to find that they're more than happy to.
I mean, I've never met a photographer that wasn't very game to talk about their lenses and like their
Most people are very happy.
They're pretty happy to. So yeah, that is. And again, I'm more than willing to help mentor any of you for your music choices. But I do think that is something that just takes sort of stepping out. But it is very, as the article kind of gets into, it is very rewarding once you actually kind of cross that divide. Kind of final thoughts here, things going on around the collision. Coach, again, like I said, I saw the Gran Turismo movie last night, so we'll probably have maybe a review out tomorrow or sometime on this weekend. I think the movie itself doesn't come out until the end of the month, so there's some time for that. But I really enjoyed it. I think it is a movie that is worth checking out even if you're not a big car person like I'm not. So do that. If you haven't checked out our other reviews, like the Meg, you can check it out on our YouTube channel or go to thecollision.org to read the written words and some of that. Any kind of final thoughts for you?
Well, you've also got the cussing in cartoons. I think that came out since our last
so we also
live stream. So that's on the collision.org as well. Just what's up with all the swearing in kids' movies these days?
Yeah, I know we talked about that last episode, but
you take the soap out of the box and stand on that box
I
for
clean
a few
out,
minutes.
and then I clean out Hollywood's mouth with that soap because apparently it needs that. So check that out. Always a lot of stuff going on our website and our channel. So we'd love to have you be a part of that. Most of all, guys, thanks for joining us again. Hope you'll join us next week. Every Thursday at noon. We'd love to have you be a part of these conversations. But thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide through world for Christ.